Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's daily global conversation around the COVID-19 crisis. We're actually discussing three crises: the health, financial, and racial inequality crises. We're always looking for guests and theme ideas. Please email us, sree@sree.net, sree@sree.net. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism and the co-founder of Digimentors, a social, digital, and virtual events consulting business. Our motto: don't postpone your conference without talking to us. We are very grateful that you're with us today. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Please tag a friend. Please hit share. You know someone in the world would benefit from this conversation. And what is our conversation? Today, we have a very special guest. Arva Rice is with us. She's the president and CEO of New York Urban League, a 100-year-old nonprofit working for African-American empowerment. And we're so grateful to her for her time on a weeknight here at 9 p.m. Eastern. Please tag your friends. Please hit share. We're going to meet her in just a couple of minutes. We're going to give you a moment to share and connect, including Arva. She gets to post on her Facebook and say that she's live right now with the link to this particular show. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. This is show number 105. That means we've been on lockdown in New York for 105 days. And we are seeing that many parts of America now have fresh highest record numbers of coronavirus cases and deaths in many instances as well. And that is so tragic. It's as if the lessons of the first 100 days were not heeded, were not understood, and now we're all paying the price. Please make sure that you are looking at our content, because if you go into our archives, you will find we've done so many shows around the healthcare crisis, including a Q&A that we did on our 99th episode just last week with the chief scientist of WHO and the head of pandemics for WHO. And they had so much great advice to us as a nation in America, but also to the world about how to handle the lockdown and what's still to come. One of the lessons is that this is not the second wave that's hitting America. We're still on the first wave. We are going to start our conversation with Arva Rice in just a minute. Before that, we have to thank our sponsors. And as always, we're very grateful to our sponsors. If you know anyone who would like to sponsor us, please let us know by emailing me, sree@sree.net. First, we want to thank Art & Co. Get involved with the world's largest online art auction, fundraising for COVID-19 victims. Go to artandco.net, artandco.net. Everyone watching, please tag your friends. Please hit share. We'd love for more folks to join us and learn from us today. Go to artandco.net and learn about this wonderful art auction. We also want to thank our friends at Rutgers Global Entrepreneurship Experience. This is a virtual teen camp for teens interested in entrepreneurship. Any teenager anywhere in the world can participate. You can get 20% off with the code SREE. Take a photo, take a screenshot, globalentrepreneurshipexperience.org. They have terrific guests and speakers from Cognizant, Angie's List, Google, Facebook, among many others, and one terrible speaker, me. Your team can skip that session for sure. We also want to thank our friends at Muckrack for allowing us to create Muckrack's Fundamentals of Social Media, a free certification course available right now. Upskill yourself. No matter how much experience you have on social, you will benefit from this. So open to any profession, any background, any age. mrac.co/social. It's about 2 hours worth of content. You will learn a lot, I promise you. And finally, we want to let you know about this terrific new show called She's on Call, which I'm honored to executive produce with my friends, Dr. Sujana and Marina. They are surgeons in the New York City area, and every Sunday they have a conversation about healthcare and what's happening with the news, and they also have great guests. This past Sunday, their guests were Dr. Nadia Hernandez and Dr. Lilun Lee. and they talked about their work and took your questions. And you can see this all at She's on Call on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. So please check out She's on Call. Please subscribe right now. And if you would like to have your own talk show, please talk to us, Sree@Sree.net. Are you ready? I'm ready for Arva Rice of the New York Urban League, an organization that's worked for so long to help so many people in the New York City area and the region. So please welcome Arva Rice. Hi, Arva.
Hello, Sree. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you this evening.
Thank you for being here. We're so grateful. The first thing I ask all our guests, how are you? How is your family through all that we've gone through?
Thank you so much for that question. I am tired. I am tired because it has been, as you mentioned, we are over 100 days into COVID-19, and so I am tired, but I am also hopeful because of the number of protesters that have been out talking about the racial inequality that COVID has really underscored. And so I am both tired, but I am also hopeful. I'm also grateful that the members of my family are doing well. Ironically, I am here in New York City, as you know, and we are just going into phase 2 of being able to kind of integrate back into the communities if we do that by being careful. And my family is in Texas, and so they are the ones who are now experiencing a spike in COVID cases. And so they are now experiencing what I did in New York City. And so we are switching places, but I know that they will be mindful, they will wash their hands, and they will wear masks, and they will social distance, and hopefully they will get to the other side of this epidemic soon.
We certainly hope they will be able to do that. The hard part, as you know, is that things have been changing so quickly elsewhere. They all looked at us like we're the basket case, and then now they're the ones who are, we saw that early with us here in New York. Do you remember how we would look at Italy and Asia and say, boy, those folks are in real trouble. This is not affecting us. And then what happened?
Then it hit us. And as Governor Cuomo liked to say in his daily press, that we thought that the disease was coming from China, but the fact is that it was coming from Europe. And so we left the back door open to that. And as a result of that, we, as you know, the highest number, I'll never, forget when we got up to, 699 individuals whose lives were lost on a daily basis due to COVID-19. And so it was some very dark days for our city. But we were able to pull through, and hopefully with being able to manage right now, that we'll be able to have this be the last of the first wave, which you said in your opening comments. I do not believe that we've completed that phase at all, but hopefully we can move to the last of the first wave and be able to move forward from there.
And that's what we're praying for everybody. Some folks who are watching and looking at things like what happened in Tulsa, you remember at the rally last Saturday, or in Arizona where there's no social distancing, no masks. And someone said, these folks deserve to get sick if they do. And I said, that's the wrong attitude, because first of all, you don't want to wish anybody ill will, but also that will just keep it all in the air in the US and anywhere in the world. This is not going to go away. If some people are getting sick and others are not, no one's immune. Isn't that the problem?
Truly, the fact is that if anyone gets sick, it becomes a risk for all of us. We've heard about the increase in cases, as I mentioned, in Texas, but they're also in Florida as well. And as you know, Florida and New York are a regular corridor. So we can only hope for good health for all of us. We can only hope that everyone takes very seriously the ideas and the notions that have been successful here in the city. It's hurt my heart to hear people politicize wearing a mask. The fact is that we have found the strategies that we put in place in New York to be effective. And so why not utilize this? This disease is not a Democrat disease. It is not a Republican disease. It is a disease that has taken over us as a world, as a country. And so we need to be able to put in place those strategies that we have that have been proven successful.
Well, folks, you're going to learn a lot tonight from Arva Rice. She's on Twitter at Arva Rice, and the Urban League is at NY Urban League on Twitter. Please follow them. One of the things we like to do here, Arva, is to do what I call a global tour. People are telling us where they're watching from, and we're going to see their comments. And as I mentioned these places, if you wouldn't mind either a memory, if you've been there, of something you've
Oh.
eaten or somewhere you've been, or if it's on your bucket list of a place to go, or if you hated the place, you can tell us. I know you wouldn't do that, but you'll tell us all of that. Let's start with Union Square. Jonathan, by the way, has watched 100 straight episodes, 105 straight days at Union Square. So any memories of Union Square?
Oh, wow. Look at that. That's pretty impressive. Union Square is, a wonderful part of New York City. Have been to many a rally and a function there, as well as going to the coffee shop for turkey sandwiches with my sister. So love that.
Nice. Well, you want to give a shout out to your family? Where is your sister?
Oh, absolutely. So as I mentioned, my mom, my brother, my sister, my nieces and nephews are all in Austin, Texas. So a big hello to them. And then another part of my family is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So a big hello to them as well.
Yeah, two great cities. And we would have been in Austin for the usual South by Southwest. That's where I was supposed to go. And that, of course, got canceled right at the beginning of all of this. Anand's watching from India, Andhra Pradesh. Have you been?
I have not been, but it is definitely on my bucket list. I had a wonderful opportunity before coming to the New York Urban League. I did some microfinance, micro lending in a nonprofit. And so I was able to learn a lot about India and some of the ways in which you have been really at the forefront of microfinance and providing opportunities for families and particularly women to develop financial independence. And so I would love to come to visit at some point.
Yeah, and for people who haven't been following, India, Bangladesh, and countries like that have been at the forefront of all the microfinance work that really makes an impact, makes a difference. Radyan's watching from Long Island.
Look at that, Long Island. I've definitely been there. Probably going to be out there this weekend. Love to be on Long Island and be able to be in a backyard and take my mask off for just a moment or two. So a big shout out to some of my friends on Long Island as well.
Very cool. Noah says cool. And Doug is watching from Northern California. He's at SF Doug. So we'll let you talk about San Francisco for a minute.
Oh, I love San Francisco and also love Oakland as well. Have really appreciated spending some time out there, helping and supporting some of the educational efforts that were being put in place at that time, helping them to examine and explore the idea of putting together beacon schools, which were schools that were open well into the evening and after hours to provide supports to families in their communities. And so that was the first time that I got out to San Francisco, and I think it's a beautiful, beautiful part of the country.
It really is. And SF Doug does a really good job with a newsletter of coronavirus headlines. So everyone should go to douglevy.com and sign up, or message with him and find out how to sign up at SF Doug on Twitter. Rose is saying hello. You already met Rose, is one of our two producers, and she's fabulous. The other one is Vandana Menon. They're tweeting at Rose Horowitz 31 and Vandana_Menon. Lori saying hi from Westchester County.
Look at that. Westchester County is the home of another urban league and my dear friend, the CEO there, Soraya Sampson. And so I want to give a shout out to the folks in Westchester. As I'm sure your audience knows, Westchester was one of the places hit very hard by COVID in the very beginning stages of the disease. And so they were quarantined, and a lot of the strategies that were put in place up there became the model for how to contain the disease. But they are recovering, as is the rest of New York State. And so big shout out to my people in Westchester.
Yes, I love that. Well, let's see who else is here. Who else? There's so many different folks. Oh, my wife is watching from upstairs. We're on Fire Island for the week. And so she says we're watching from upstairs. She could probably hear us. And look at this. How nice is this? Tukwande is watching from Uganda in East Africa at 4 a.m. Thank you so much for watching, Tuku. We're so grateful to you for being here with us. Have you been to Uganda?
I have not been to Uganda. The only place on the continent I've been to is South Africa, and had an opportunity to visit there just a few years after the fall of apartheid. And it was one of the most impactful visits of my entire life. And so being able to go there at that particular point in time and hear the stories directly from villagers who had lost individuals in the struggle there. And a quick story, I was committed to trying to read Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom before I got there, because I wanted to be grounded in the history of South Africa and not be an ugly American who, just only knew about what had happened in the United States. And so I literally, this was before the days where you had books digitized. So I walked around with this 1,300 pages of The Long Walk to Freedom. And so I was committed to reading that. And then when I got to South Africa, I found out that the heroes that individuals knew were not heroes like, they were definitely heroes like Nelson Mandela, but their heroes were the people who taught in their schools. The heroes were the people who, ran local businesses. The heroes were the people who, marched at protests, and their heroes really walked amongst them. And that was just really inspirational to be a part of.
And doesn't that sound like today, when those are the people who are our heroes as well? Do you remember Shonda Rhimes, I think, had one of the best tweets of the entire pandemic? She had been on kid duty for 1 hour, and she said that teachers are our heroes and they need to be paid $1 billion a year. She's been homeschooling for just an hour.
Right.
They should be paid $1 billion a year or per day. She said it's just what they do is too important. Same way, you know how we were using the term essential workers, but many of those essential workers were called unskilled workers just, in February, and how things have changed in terms of the delivery workers, the people in the shops, things like that. And so I think a lot of eyes have been opened, but will they stay opened is the question that I'm going to ask you in a little bit as we get to the heart of the questions tonight. But thank you so much for being here and this great conversation that we're having. We just do a couple more countries and cities, if that's okay with you. By the way, Jonathan says he misses the coffee shop as well. Closed due to rent increase, alas, and not just. So when you said coffee shop, that was an actual place, not just any coffee shop.
Yes, the coffee shop was a business that was right there in Union Square, that was right next to my sister's dorm at NYU. And as I mentioned, we would go there for turkey burgers. The French fries had chives on them. They were delicious. And the cost of rent just made the restaurant to close. And I think that that's an important piece that I'm sure that you have talked about with your audience is the impact of COVID on small businesses. And I think that we need to make sure that we are as supportive of small businesses as we move into phase 2 and 3 and all the other phases that we'll go through, to be as supportive of New Yorkers who have been hit by COVID in terms of the health issues, but also those who have been hit in terms of the financial issues as well.
And we'll be talking about that for a long time to come, alas. Here is Jasbir saying, I'm worried about if this will be a second hit. And as we're saying, the first hit isn't over. Here's Jorge from Puerto Rico. Have you been?
To Puerto Rico, yes, I have. I definitely have been to Puerto Rico and really enjoyed my time there. Was able to go to El Yunque and visit the rainforest there, which was absolutely gorgeous. Enjoyed being part of the people. The fruit was fantastic. Loved Puerto Rico, and my love and prayers to them as they recover from various issues and weather-related things that they have gone through. But I know that they are strong and that they will come through and get to the other side.
Absolutely. We have my wife and I have had a 20-year love affair with Puerto Rico, and we go as often as we can, and our prayers and thoughts are with the people there always. We'll do a couple more. Radian is watching, as you know, in Long Island, and he says, San Francisco is a great food town. The Tadnik Grill was founded by a Croatian family around the time of the gold rush. It's the oldest restaurant in California. And he says, sadly, essential workers is what used to be called cannon fodder in other ways of looking at it, people who were sacrificed in some way. And Jonathan says that the impact is especially hard on restaurants. And Jorge says, acknowledges your greeting to Puerto Rico. So we appreciate that very much. And Jorge, be in touch. We'll see you in Puerto Rico as soon as we possibly can. So let's go to Arva and talk to her specifically about the work of the New York Urban League. Maybe you can start by giving us a kind of sketch of the organization, and I'll show the website while you speak.
Absolutely. And if I can ask Jorge, he mentioned that restaurant in, I believe it was in San Francisco. So if he could drop that into the chat, the next time we are there, we would love to be able to go there and support our essential workers. Because like I said, it is important for us to be as supportive of other New Yorkers and as you all around the world, to be supportive of individuals who are essential workers and others who are going to try to come out of this COVID situation and be the stronger for it. So let me tell you a little bit about my organization, the New York Urban League. I am privileged to serve as the president and CEO of the organization. I'm the second female to have this role in the organization's 100-year history. The New York Urban League is one of over 90 affiliates around the country, and that country being the United States. And so there are over 90 urban leagues around the country who are dedicated to education, employment, housing, and healthcare. And our goal is to empower communities and change lives. The New York Urban League was founded during the Great Migration. And the Great Migration was that time in U.S. history where it was about 100 years after the abolition of slavery. Actually, it was more like 45 years after the abolition of slavery in the early 1900s. And African Americans were still picking cotton. They were still picking tobacco, and they were doing something called sharecropping, which is where they would rent out a piece of land, they would mine that land, and then at the end of it, they would settle up their debts and hopefully have a few dollars left in order to save. And it seemed like every year they were never able to get ahead. And so as a result of that, they said, you know what, we're going to leave. We're going to leave the deep South and make that trek to the North, because we know that industrial cities are hiring people to work in factories, hiring people to work in the railroads. And so let's make that great trip north. And that process was the Great Migration. And so you saw literally millions of African Americans pick up and move off of plantations and move off of very rural situations and move into cities. Well, once they got to cities, to the great promised land, as they were told, things were really difficult in those big cities as well. There was still deep segregation, and it was hard to figure out and to navigate how to find a place to get your child some type of education, in order to find a church, in order to find a home base. And so urban leagues were created. And urban leagues were designed to be a home for those individuals who are making that great transition. And so 100 years later, that is still what we do. We provide individuals with help and support in getting living wage jobs. We provide them with scholarships to go to school. We've given over $20 million in Whitney M. Young scholarships to send people to school. And we also advocate when we find that there are things that are happening for African Americans that we feel where there's inequality of access or in outcomes. And so that is the work that we do on a daily basis. And so I'm so pleased and proud to lead the New York Urban League.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Tell us a little bit about the team that you have and give them a shout out too.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to do that. Yes, I have a wonderful staff of people that are working with me. We have our directors of education and employment. A big shout out to Diana Coleman and Donna Terektikin, Lisa Boyd, who served as our interim Chief Operations Officer, to Miss Yvonne Smothers. Miss Yvonne leads a project that specifically supports other smaller nonprofit organizations who are trying to do great work and make big impact, big supporters. And thank you to our fiscal staff who make sure that everybody gets paid and paid on time and pays all of our vendors. And so then also to our program staff who work in education and employment. And like I said, work all day, every day to empower communities and change lives. And I see that you're also listing our board of directors, who is led by a wonderful gentleman, Mr. Ward Corbett, our board of directors works on a volunteer basis. And so they come together on a regular basis to see how the Urban League is doing, how we're impacting communities. They bring their own resources to the table. So they enlist their friends, their networks, their corporations to make sure that we're able to fulfill our mission. And so they really are our biggest advocates out there in the world. They're our ambassadors. So big thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to thank our board of directors and staff. They make me look good, and I appreciate them.
Thank you. And we are looking at the website, and I see right on the top, it says what we stand for: education, employment, empowerment, and advocacy. And let's walk through each of the four.
Sure. So when we talk about education, the New York Urban League is dedicated to working with individuals starting at the middle school level all the way through college, to and through college. As I mentioned, a big part of what we do is give scholarships to individuals. One of the highlights of my year every year is we have a absolutely huge historically Black college and university fair that takes place up at Riverbank State Park in Harlem. We had over 5,000 young people attend our fair last year. They stood online waiting for an opportunity to come in and to talk to recruiters about what the college process is. There was on-site acceptance. Every time a person was accepted into school, a bell would go off, and the bell was going off all day with young people who were able to realize their educational aspirations and dreams. Our young professionals are a group of individuals who are already college graduates who give back to the Urban League in amazing ways. They provide over 15,000 hours of community service, and part of that service is serving as mentors to the Whitney M. Young Scholars. We also have boot camps through the summer. We work in after-school support, and just really helping our young people to achieve their educational goals and to realize their potential. That's what we do in our education program. And we have a number of education partners that you've mentioned there, corporations that we partner with and help us to achieve those ambitious goals. And then in employment, a core part of the Urban League movement for over 100 years has been being able to provide African Americans and others with opportunities for employment, whether it is through specific training programs that help them to develop their computer skills, construction skills, and or if it is working with them on their resumes, helping to build the bridge between the corporations that we have a regular contact with, and then interacting, giving our audience an opportunity to interact with them. And so if you need or want to find work at the New York Urban League, as you can see, you can go to our website and find more information there on our career and employment services. And then we talk about empowerment. And so when we talk about empowerment, that is really an opportunity for individuals to realize a little bit more of the opportunities that are available to them. One of the things that we do is we have an education policy committee that is made up of some of our young professionals, teachers, educators, people who work in the after-school space. And so we provide them with an opportunity to learn more about how education policy is created and implemented in New York City and New York State. We train them how to write opinion pieces, and they're able to interact directly in the decision-making process. We also have our capacity building effort, which I mentioned, that's led by Miss Yvonne Smothers. And so that works with nonprofit organizations to help them to build their capacity to work with others. One of the things that we'll be releasing next month is our State of Black New York, which is a publication that is released on an annual basis. The National State of Black America is produced by our national office, and the New York Urban League State of Black New York will be released next month. That really looks at how are African Americans doing in key and critical areas: housing, healthcare, education, employment, criminal justice, and civic engagement. And so the State of Black New York report will come out next month and really chronicle those various different areas.
If I could trouble you, we'd love to do something around that, around the release of the report. I know that day you'll be very busy, but maybe you and maybe a colleague who is involved in that report, or you could send him or her to join us for a conversation that day, if you wouldn't mind. We would love to learn along with everybody else.
We would love to be able to talk about the results from the State of Black report. The theme this year is inequality is unacceptable. And we chose that as our theme even before Ahmaud Arbery, even before Breonna Taylor, even before George Floyd. But unfortunately, that title has become even more important. And so we're excited to be able to talk about the State of Black New York, and would welcome the opportunity to come back to the show. And then the last piece that we're speaking about is advocacy. And so that is the last area of work that we focus on. And that is, once again, when we find the places and spaces where African Americans are not being treated at the level in which we think that they should, then we mobilize in order to advocate in those areas. Not surprisingly, a lot of our work right now is around police reform and helping to set the stage for talking about what does defund the police mean versus to to completely disband the police and or to reimagine. And so our advocacy efforts right now are focusing in on police reform, as well as providing some feedback to our mayor and our governor about budget priorities. So the last of our work is in advocacy. So the New York Urban League, once again, works in education, employment, and advocacy.
Awesome. So much great work you're doing, and very, very impressive. I also just got to say the quality of the website is of, very high, very high. The photographs just bounce out. You see a lot of nonprofits where you wish they were using more photography, more video, and you're doing all of that. It looks really inviting, and so much great content here. So I'm really excited to see that. Let's make sure we continue to get in the comments and questions that people are posting from around the world. You can just comment right there, or you can email me as well if you have questions. So let's talk to Arva a little bit first about her own journey to this job. Tell us about where you grew up and where you got started in the nonprofit world, and after where you went to school, things like that, please.
Sure, absolutely. My personal story really connects to the story of the New York Urban League. As I mentioned, the Urban League was started by individuals who were making the Great Migration, making the decision that they wanted to have a better life for their children and their families. And so they moved to unknown places and spaces. And so for my family, that meant a move from Arkansas to Chicago, and then getting to Chicago, finding out the job that had been promised to my father was no longer there by the time he made it to the north. So he went to the next big city, and that was Milwaukee. And so I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so that was where I had my formative years, went to school in Chicago, and particularly in Evanston, Illinois at Northwestern University, and then moved out to New York City upon graduating from school. And my mother always said to us that we were responsible for pulling up the next generation. Don't just open the door, but make sure that you leave the door open and encourage others to follow through. And so for my mother and father, who did not have an opportunity to go to college, it was their long-term goal to make sure that all four of their children were able to graduate from college, and to be able to create opportunities to keep the door open for others. And so I am so thrilled and pleased to work at the New York Urban League. I've worked in the nonprofit sector all of my professional career. So upon graduating from college, I worked as a New York City Urban Fellow, and then started to work in an after-school program there, and have worked in, as I mentioned, the microfinance organization that did those small loans that were created in Bangladesh based on the Grameen model. And so that's how I came to know about India and about Bangladesh, and then came to work at the New York Urban League, and just feel so unbelievably just grateful for the opportunity to do the work that I do on a daily basis.
That's great. And there you are, you're tweeting as well, and you're at Arva Rice. And tell us about this painting you chose behind you.
Yeah. Thank you. So the photo that is behind me is actually a mural that is in Uruguay. And I had an opportunity through the Department of State to travel to Uruguay and to speak to some of the community-based organizations that were there. For some of you, you probably know this better than I. I know this is a global community of individuals who are watching the show and listening in tonight. Uruguay is a unique country in South America that is particularly made a decision to recruit a lot of Europeans to their country. And so the people that are of African descent that are there are actually the minority. And so those minorities had formed community-based organizations, but did not have a lot of the structures that one would need in order to really build and support those organizations. And so I was flown down to Uruguay to provide a series of trainings to build the capacity of those nonprofit organizations. And I was invited because I had this level of skill, and I was supposed to be bringing and imparting knowledge. And over the course of my time with them, I learned more from them than I think that they learned from me. And it was just an extraordinary experience.
Love that. And your Twitter bio says you're president and CEO of the New York Urban League, advocate for women and girls issues, a proud Harlemite, and even prouder auntie. So that's lovely. Let's go in here and see what are some of the other things you've been sharing and posting, and you're sharing about what's happening in Harlem right there. With talk about some of these other folks who are in your same space, organizations doing great work?
Mm-hmm. Yes, New York is home to a number of really terrific nonprofit organizations. It has a nonprofit thriving community that is, bar none. And the work that the nonprofits do in New York City help to stitch the social service net and make it important and vital for individuals to be able to have their families to provide childcare, to be able to provide engaging activities for their teenagers, to help them to transition from one area of employment to the other, to celebrate their culture, and to be able to celebrate the arts and culinary. And so our nonprofit community is absolutely vital. And you'll see on my Twitter feed, I'm asking for the city council and for our mayor to be very respectful of the nonprofit organizations that are led particularly by people of color. They're usually the organizations that have been around for the least amount of time. The fact that the New York Urban League is a 100-year-old nonprofit is really rare. Usually nonprofit organizations that are run by people of color are usually 10, 20, maybe 30 years old. And so for those younger nonprofit organizations, we need to make sure that they receive the support that they can so that they get to the other side of this COVID epidemic, because it is a very fragile time for our small businesses as well as our small nonprofits.
And I love this post from the Schomburg Center.
Yes, the Schomburg Center is a very near and dear place within the New York Urban League. The Schomburg Center was created because the papers of Arturo Schomburg wanted to save them. Arturo, as a young boy, was told that there was no history of African Americans, and Arturo was of Puerto Rican and African descent, and so he wanted to find out more about his culture and his community, and so he dedicated his life just basically to finding every piece of paper, every article, everything that he could to talk about the history of African Americans. And so when he passed away, people did not know what to do with these papers. And so they came to the New York Urban League and started to have meetings and said, what can we do? What are the possibilities? And so the New York Urban League was able to be the fiscal conduit for the grant that they received from the Carnegie Corporation that was what became the Schomburg Center. So the New York Urban League and the Schomburg are tied together. We have a shared history, and we just love the work that they do.
And that's great to hear that story. I did not know that backdrop. We'll look at one more thing on your Twitter feed right here. We see that you have posted about Juneteenth, and I wanted to talk to you about that because Juneteenth is something that African Americans marked and variously celebrated, but this year something special happened in a way that surprised most of my Black friends because they hadn't seen this level of interest. And so now that a week has passed, can you kind of grade the movement, the involvement, the shout outs, everything that people did? I'm putting you on the spot, but if you could kind of share your thoughts on what you saw around Juneteenth.
Yeah, Sree, I love these questions. These are fantastic. So Juneteenth was a complete surprise to me. It's a holiday that is celebrated in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I'm from. So it is a tradition that I was very familiar with. As I mentioned earlier, my family now lives in Texas. So there's a wonderful picture of my sister standing at the very place where the Union General announced to all the slaves that were gathered there on Juneteenth, 1865, and heard that, in fact, slavery had been abolished. So it is that holiday has very much been a part of my family tradition, but it was very much a kind of quiet holiday that was celebrated by African Americans and not every African American. And so for us at this particular point in time to have this holiday really just celebrated in a way that we haven't seen before was very wonderful in some ways. I celebrated my Juneteenth by doing a conversation with the director of diversity at Major League Baseball. And if anyone had told me a year ago that I would have 500 members of Major League Baseball having a conversation about Juneteenth, I would have told them that's no way that could have happened. But we have a level of raised consciousness right now that I think is truly wonderful. Juneteenth provided an opportunity for individuals to go to places like the Schomburg, look up their list of books that are available, look up their list of resources, and make a commitment to read and to find out more. But at the same time, there is more work that needs to be done. So symbols are important. The symbol of having off, Governor Cuomo gave state employees the day off for Juneteenth, and I think that that's important. But we have to move beyond symbols and do some of the systematic changes that need to be necessary in order to truly eradicate racism.
And I'll point out that there is a movement now to make Juneteenth a holiday. And knowing this kind of environment, there's a chance that might happen. But as you know, but not all our viewers may know, that actually it wasn't easy to get even the MLK holiday. And a lot of senators at the time opposed it and had to be convinced to give one day a year to an African-American leader. And so the fact that we can even talk about and envision a time when Juneteenth would be an actual national holiday tells us something about the moment. But as you said, there's a lot of systemic work that needs to happen. I want to remind our viewers that by coincidence, Juneteenth fell this year on our 100th episode of this show, and we had a fabulous conversation that everyone can find in our archives, youtube.com/SreeNet. We met Professor Noliwe Rooks, who is the W.E. Du Bois Professor at Cornell, Brandy Harden, a lawyer and board member at Justice Aid, Kenny Irby, who is at Irby Man. He's a pastor, a teacher. He works with the police to help them work with the community in better ways down in St. Pete, Florida. And Jonathan Borstein, who was our 100th, who had watched for 100 straight days. He was also a guest, and so were other folks. Our friend Bob Anthony was here, who's at New York Bob, and another great Twitter handle at Mom of All Capes. Amber was also here with us, and we all talked about various aspects. We had a 2.5-hour show that day, and we learned so much. It tells you how quickly people can get educated if they want to and need to get educated. So I'm giving our friend Arva a moment to just relax. She's been on camera for 30 straight minutes and just maybe even a little longer. She can drop her shoulders and relax for a little bit, drink some water. And I want to remind all of you, we have about 20 minutes left with Arva. I'm learning so much. I know you're learning so much. Please tag a friend right now, someone who would benefit from hearing this conversation. They can watch it right after on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on LinkedIn. Please connect with me. Please follow me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, follow me on YouTube, and follow me on LinkedIn. We want to hear your questions. We are doing this every night, folks. We are committed to understanding these three simultaneous crises we're going through: the health crisis, the economic crisis, and the racial inequality crisis. Of course, the third one has been around forever, and we are now, everybody, including me, are paying attention more because of what happened to George Floyd. And one of the things we do on this show, and I hope Arva will be able to join me at the end of the show, we had Professor Kimberly Crenshaw on, who as a guest said, you must say their names, and we will say their names. And I would be honored if Arva would join me at the end to do that together if she has the time. But a reminder, everybody, we have about 20 minutes left. We want to get to your comments, and I know their comments are coming in, and we want to share them with Arva. So let's bring her back on after a little break that I hope you got to stretch for a little bit, but probably not.
I did have a glass of water, so that was helpful. And it doesn't even feel like I've been talking to you for 30 minutes. So thank you so much for being such a wonderful interviewer. I'm actually delighted to be part of the conversation.
Thank you. And I hate to tell you, this has been 44 minutes. So that's even that's even more of a compliment, I guess. But it just shows you how much we have to talk about and how much we all want to learn together. And I presume your days are filled like mine, one Zoom call after another.
It is back-to-back Zoom calls. It is being able to have conversations like this. It is our corporate partners calling us and saying that they want to have meaningful conversations about race with their employees. They want to diversify their staffs, and so they want to know how the Urban League can partner with them. It is various allies calling and checking in and asking me how I am, but it is definitely long days, but days full of hope and opportunity.
I love that attitude, hope and opportunity. Let's also take a look at your Facebook. Love this picture. Look at this, Yankee Stadium. Tell us how you use social media, and what are the kinds of things you're hoping to do and continue to do?
Mm-hmm. I mean, the power of social media is just amazing. And we knew that before we went into COVID, but it has just obviously been exponential since that moment in time. I don't know about you, but when I first heard that New York City was closing and I told my staff members we all needed to figure out ways to work from home, I took one pen and one notebook and proceeded to head back home, thinking that we might be shut in for 2 weeks or so. Yeah. And as you know, we are well over 100 days. And so we had to take all of our programming and move it to a virtual platform. So for us, social media no longer was something that would be interesting to do, but it became our way of interacting with the world, of checking in with the young people that we serve, our scholars, checking with individuals who had, just days before been looking for jobs or starting in new positions. And so we had to find new ways. We obviously picked up the phone to have conversation with people, but we also created other venues for that as well. And I saw on the Facebook page that one of the things that you scrolled by was our virtual town halls. And so what we decided to do was to bring together some grouping of experts in order to speak about what COVID-19 was at the time, because at the time we didn't even know, how do you get it? How do you keep from getting it? We had conversations about why is it that all the Black and brown folks seem to die from this? What's happening? And so we decided that we would do a town hall or two and see if individuals would be interested in logging on. It was the first time we'd ever done anything like that, to put something into the virtual space. So we said, well, we'll let people know, maybe 30 or 40 people will tune in, and we'll see how it goes. And that very first town hall, we had over 300 people who joined in, and it just grew exponentially from there. And it was individuals who, like I said, were told to stay home by our governor, and so they were, but they wanted to know how to move through, talk to their family members, community members, to make sure that they didn't get the disease, what they could do, what resources were there. We talked about mental health issues. We spoke with small business owners. We had the Commissioner of Small Business Services to come on and speak to our individuals. And then we also had literal doctors who came on and said, these are some of the things that you should think about and be mindful of as we move through this disease. And we also had our Lieutenant Governor who came and spoke. So it was a way of utilizing social media in a way that, once again, I would not have ever imagined 6 months ago, but now has become a critical vehicle for us.
Thank you so much. Look at this. Daryl says, wow, that's rich history, Arva. I had no idea. Thanks for joining, Sree. I learn much on every show. Vandana gave out your website address, which is nyul.org. Apollo's watching from Las Vegas. Any Vegas memories that you're allowed to share?
I actually spent my 40th birthday in Vegas, but I was there with my entire family, including my niece, who at that time must have been maybe like 6 or 7 years old. And so it was a wonderful visit. I love Las Vegas. I had a great time there. Got a chance to see some shows, saw a Cirque du Soleil show. And so, yes.
There are about 15 Cirque du Soleil shows, aren't there? There are like so many things in Vegas. There used to be.
But it was amazing. I absolutely loved it. I had a great time. Great time.
Terrific. Glad to hear it. Daryl says 15,000 hours. That was one of the ways you were counting the work you were doing. He says that's the currency of nonprofits. My mom is watching from Kerala in India. Hi, Amma. Love you. Thanks for being here with me in this way. I'm able to do this because of your love and support. Love it and love you. And Rose says it is a beautiful website. It looks great on her iPhone. So that's nice. And people are tagging other friends and doing this. And Sunny Slaughter is here. Wonderful show and an amazing guest. And Sunny was on our show very early, right after the week of George Floyd's death. And one of the things we discussed, Arva, that I want to connect with you also, you referred to this, the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on African Americans. And one of the colleagues who joined Sunny in the show was our friend Adam Serwer, who is a writer for the Atlantic. And he said President Trump paid attention as much as he did until he understood that with Black folks, poor folks, Hispanic folks that are dying from the disease. And that's when he ramped up the open now strategy that has resulted in a lot of the problems we're seeing today. How do you see that as the impact of who's being affected, and what can we do going forward? Because this is not over.
I mentioned that we did our very first virtual town hall, and was focusing in on COVID, and particularly the inequities in COVID. And at that time, when we decided to do the town hall, we didn't actually know that it would hit African Americans, that it would hit Latinos at a higher level. But history has told us that when mainstream America has a cold, usually African Americans have pneumonia. And so our thought was that if we were going to be struck by this disease, that we would be struck economically, that the impact of our community of not working for weeks on end would have a huge impact. At the time, we did not realize that things like crowded housing, things like underlying symptoms, things like being essential workers and working actually in hospitals and working in service industries would make you also more susceptible to the disease. So we found that out over time. And so when the stories started to hit, when the headlines said the number of individuals in Chicago who were hit with the disease, over 40% of the deaths in Chicago, even though we didn't represent that amount of the population, were dying from COVID. When the numbers started to come out in New Orleans about the number of people who are dying from COVID within our communities. And then unfortunately in New York City, first it started out as African Americans being the ones who had the highest mortality rate. And then the Latinos men got the dubious distinction of outranking us and then becoming the ones to die the most from COVID-19. And so there was a part of me who said, this is terrific. Finally, people are beginning to see the fact that our communities are being hit by this disease. And so we need to put together and put into place things that will help to build the social security net and the security net for our communities. But then as your other guest pointed out, our administration saw who was being impacted. Individuals in nursing homes, individuals who are poor, those people who are of color, and we did immediately see the shift to opening up of the economy. And so it became more important for the economy to be successful than for the individual lives of Americans. Unfortunately, as we've seen different cities and states who have been able to get this under control, including New York State, we've seen a blossoming and a boom of COVID cases in other states. And so our president can try to ignore this, but it is an epidemic. And as you stated in the beginning, it is an epidemic that is in phase 1. And so he is going to need to address it, or it is going to be, we will not ever get out of phase 1 in order to go to phase 2. And he's heard that from his advisors, from Dr. Fauci. And it doesn't matter if he stopped doing press conferences on a daily basis, because the reality of this disease still lives with us.
Yeah, Dr. Thomas Frieden, who used to be the New York City Health Commissioner, said, we're sick and tired of the virus, but it's not sick and tired of us yet. It is still around. And that was a warning from him for all of us. Daryl salutes your legacy of keeping the door open, not just opening the door, but keeping it open for the next legacy, for the next generation. And Apollo says, yay, Bangladesh. I lived in South Asia for a couple of years. Fantastic, uplifting country, BD is. Mark is watching from Durham, North Carolina, another one of our fabulous former guests on the show. He talked about the importance of allyship for African Americans. African Americans cannot do this on their own. We need to be there to help, and he gave us great ideas. Arva, you probably remember my good late friend Garland Thompson Sr. He was a major supporter of New York community and ran the Frank Silvera Writers Workshop. And Apollo says the Urban League should totally promote the Rutgers International Youth Leadership Forum. Traveling saved my life. Living in India enabled me to cope with the racist provocations riddling a triggered Black American life experience in America. How interesting is that? Rahadian says, love the Schomburg Center. I attend the annual Black Comic Book Convention every January. Awesome. I want to know about that. And Vandana is linking to the Schomburg legacy there so that people can learn it. And another friend, Chuck Davis, says Mark used to talk about his connection to New York with Dance Africa. And of course, my friend Calvin Anderson is still very active in both Atlanta, New York, North Carolina, and New York City art scenes. And he says, I'm a Marquette graduate, so glad to see Milwaukee shouted out. Only spent
Yay.
4.5 years there, but loved the city. And Apollo says, wasn't the U.S. Capitol completely built right at the monument at the moment of Juneteenth? They were building it out during the war. I'm not sure of the exact timing. If Arva knows, he'll tell us. And Amelia says, he's posting in Spanish. So I'm sorry that I can't read that, but if someone can read that, we'll see. Neil says, sorry, I'm joining late. Yay, MLB's conversation on Juneteenth. What did Miss Rice think of the NFL Roger Goodell's response on Juneteenth? Over to you.
Wow, those are such fabulous comments. It's hard to pick which one to focus in on. So I'm gonna be lazy and pick the last one about the commissioner of the NFL and his response to Juneteenth and his overall response to Colin Kaepernick and his, as we all know, famously taking the knee to focus on the issues of police brutality and the response to him of him not being able to work at the NFL for almost 4 years. And so he is the one who, in the final analysis, as COVID-19, this disease that like nothing the world has ever seen, brought America to its knee. And we had to look at the disease of the coronavirus. We also had to look at our original disease, and that is of racism. And so I am happy that the commissioner acknowledged that. I think that he clearly owes Mr. Kaepernick a one-on-one apology and probably a public apology, because he, lost income to his family. He lost of reputation. There were people who stood by him the entire way, including his fraternity, including individuals in the community who always knew that he was standing up for justice. But he paid a price. And so I think that the commissioner needs to go even a step further in order to acknowledge that. And I think that the members of the NFL, particularly owners of the NFL, are a billionaires club, and the billionaires have a tendency to be a bit conservative. Now, there are the wonderful outliers in Michael Bloomberg and also in the Oracle of Omaha. But I think that it is important for individuals of wealth. You talked about the importance of allyship. And in a moment right now, we want our white allies to read up, to go to the Schomburg, to download the podcast, to pick up the books. But we also need them to join with us and be active. And that activity may be marching in a protest. That activity may be making a contribution to an organization that's doing well. It might be volunteering if they're a accountant doing the books for a nonprofit organization. It may be being able to provide some support for a small business, and that small business can be just making a commitment to, I'm going to go to an African American, I'm going to go to a Latino, I'm going to go to an Asian American restaurant, or I'm going to buy a gift certificate or send gift certificates to everybody in my family. But there's from the small to the very large ways in which we can be supportive. We've seen companies that have given $100 million gifts, and that's fantastic. That's the place and space that they can do that. But it's also important for us to be able to buy a $100 gift certificate as well. And every single gesture matters. Wow, so right. The $100 million matters, of course, and so do the $100 gifts. Thank you for sharing that. Lori says, really enjoying the conversation. Apollo says, hope and opportunity. That's awesome. And there's so many comments coming here. Really great, says Ashok in Kerala, India. He's watching, says, really great to see Arva would welcome her to Kerala. So that's southern India. When you get to go to India, you now have a place to go. Neil loves the picture of Yankee Stadium because he's obsessed with the Yankees. And people are just coming in here. Daryl says, wow, your impact report must be the best in New York. So many great photos, great comments coming in here from all over. Sunny says hello to her family here because that's what she is to us. And Sunny says Adam was on MSNBC tonight talking about the current conversation. And Mahesh says, hi, Arva. It's tough to express feelings, influence people without creating friction. I'm very glad that you're doing such an amazing job. Thank you. So that's really cool. And so many comments coming here. And Sunny says, as a co-chair of the violence as a public health issue for HHS and OMH,
we began to see the crisis and groups began collecting the data. Thank you for doing that. And Joe is here watching from Cummings, Georgia, right outside of Atlanta. I started working as a COVID-19 case supervisor today as cases are growing now in Georgia. I'm sorry that you are going to be very busy, Joe, but it's this is the reality that we're in. Georgia is one of those places that we can just imagine, what if Stacey Abrams had been governor of Georgia? What would things would have been different? We know women leaders do exceptionally well, and Stacey in particular, we know, would have taken us in a different direction. Sorry if you covered this earlier. What does Ms. Rice think of Nicole Hannah-Jones's piece on reparations in the New York Times, or reparations in general? Note, Nicole led development of the 1619 project, for which Sunny Slaughter was our guest. We have another show, Arva, called the New York Times Read Along, where we read aloud the Sunday New York Times every Sunday for 5 years, like crazy people, and we have guests on that. So if you're not careful, we're going to invite you to that as well down the road. But go ahead about reparations in general.
Yeah, reparations is such a great question. I had a friend of mine who said, this is wonderful, Arva, about Juneteenth, but I don't remember there being a movement around making Juneteenth a national holiday. And actually, there has been. There have been individuals along the course of time who wanted to make June 19th a national holiday. But she was making that comment because she said people are talking about Juneteenth, but we're still not talking about reparations. And so reparations is a very controversial topic, but the fact is, and then for those people who are on the phone, reparations basically is referring to the promise that was made to slaves as a result of being freed, that they would receive their 40 acres and a mule. And those 40 acres and a mule were never given to African Americans. And so the argument is made that when Japanese were brought into internment camps during World War II, there was a level of compensation that was given to them, and that African Americans have never received that compensation. And so I think it's important that we have that conversation. I am not sure if we have the political will to give reparations to those individuals who are the children, the direct ancestors of slaves, but we have to start having the conversation. I just want to do one quick history lesson, and that is, as we all know, as of Juneteenth, that was the last group of slaves that found out that slavery had been abolished. And so people often say, well, you know what is the issue with African Americans? That was over 100 years ago. You'd think that you all would have pulled yourselves up by your bootstraps by now. Well, after slavery, we had for 100 years a system that was actually put into place in city and state law and codified called Jim Crow. And Jim Crow was a series of laws that made it possible for African Americans to not own property, to not be able to borrow, to not be able to have equal education, because separate but equal was the law of the land. And so we went to inferior schools, we had inferior housing, we had inferior opportunities, and there was no legal recourse on it because it was the law of the land. We were also sharecroppers, which I believe I mentioned before, which is the practice of being basically farmers for an entire year and not being able to benefit at all for your crops. And so that system was in place for 100 years, and the last of the Jim Crow laws were not disbanded until the Civil Rights Act. And as we know, that happened in the late 1960s. And so the era of freedom for African Americans has really been a little bit over 50 years, which is less than 2 generations. And so individuals ask once again why African Americans haven't gotten to equal parity. You have to think about, this is a group of people who are working with individuals who had quite a bit of a head start. 200 years of free labor, followed by 100 years of labor where we weren't compensated for it. And so the process that we're going through right now is the greatest catch-up of our times.
Thank you. These are very, very important ideas and facts for people to know. Let's just look. We're already at 10:04. If you could stay for a couple more minutes, we'll just go through these as quickly as we can. Mark says, I have mentioned to Sree that one of the early incidents of police violence on citizens was the Ernest Lacey fatal shooting in Milwaukee in the early 80s. And so I need to look into that and understand that. There's so many questions coming in here. Ying Chan, who's a great former New Yorker, now lives in Hong Kong, says, thank you so much for the sharing. I know of the Urban League, but not of its origin and history. Amazing. And she's tagging her friends Yolanda, and Minnie. Everybody should do that. Tag a friend who would benefit from this conversation. They can watch the recording. Absolutely. We'd love for them to do that. Sonny says, Arva would be great to spend some time with us on a Sunday morning up ahead. And Neil says, yes, we definitely want Arva on the New York Times read along any Sunday at 8:30 in the morning. We'll let you get a couple of weeks in before we trouble you again. And Sonny says, teach Arva. And Rose says, agreed. And so many other comments coming in here from Radyan and Daryl and others. Everyone, please take a look. Neil says, slavery to sharecropping to Jim Crow to separate but equal, 400 years of slavery, 50 years of civil rights. It takes generations. And Sonny says, I will be 52 next year. This is so painful. I hear you, and we're here for you, Sonny. And Doug says, that's a great explanation of a terribly sad situation. Don't be pained, Paulo says. And Mark says, I want Arva on my podcast. Expect a Twitter shout out. So you're getting booked left, right, and center here for various things. I want everybody to know that before you do any of those, you're going to be with me on my Saturday spin-off show on WBAI 99.5 FM Progressive Radio right here in New York. And we're going to take calls noon to noon for about an hour. I won't subject you to 2 hours of it, but it is an amazing experience. You haven't lived till you've taken live calls on New York City radio, which I'm sure you have, Arva, but people call in extreme right, extreme left, and they have a point of view. These are New Yorkers, and they really, these are all polite international people. Wait till we have fun on Saturday. This Saturday in the morning, you're going to hear from Arva as well. So we're in the afternoon. So we're very grateful to her. So before we let you go, Chad, you'll give us a couple of final thoughts for now, because it sounds like our community is going to be hearing from you for a long time to come. But we're so grateful to you for your time and your energy for us. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. As I mentioned, this is a time like we truly have never seen before. People have asked me what is different about this moment in time, and the reasons why I think this is important is even if you were an essential worker, we were as a nation and as a world, we were asked to stay home, and so we were staying home. And we were focused all on one small set of issues because we couldn't go to movies, we couldn't go to the theater, we couldn't even go and visit our families in large ways. And so when the death of George Floyd happened, and we all saw that 8 minutes and 46 seconds of an individual losing his life, I think it woke us all up in a way that we have not seen in a generation. And so this is a moment in time that we have not seen before. I ask people to be gentle with each other as we are learning and connecting with people on a level that we have not before. And I also encourage people to challenge them, to have courageous conversations with your families, but also across race, and to use this moment, to use this time in order to make a change that can truly be transformational.
Paulo says, thank you for your blessings of hope, knowledge, and wisdom, Arva. So that's very nice. And we're just taking a quick look at one of your town halls, as you had mentioned. You had like an all-star town hall, and there's just one of the many, many things you're doing. So we encourage everybody to check out the website of the New York Urban League and follow them on Twitter and support them in their very important work that they're doing. And a big shout out to your national organization and leaders as well. So it's great to see all of this on your website. Would you have time to join me to say their names?
I would love to.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a sacred thing that we're able to do, and we're very grateful that we have earned the right to be able to do this with our family and friends. And it's difficult for a lot of us as we say the names of the victims of the violence. And we use I'm sorry that I didn't spell this all out to you in advance, but we use this cover story of Time Magazine with Titus Kaffer's amazing piece of art that you're looking at. And on the right, I don't know if you've seen this photo before, but that's a young George Floyd with his mother, Larcinia. Have you seen it?
I have not seen that particular picture. Oh, that is beautiful.
And Larcinia would die 2 years ago, and her son would be buried next to her almost to the day 2 years later. So tragic. And that is what Titus captures in this cover story with the names around it. And we have the names here. And if you would do me the honor of starting out, read a few names, and then we can alternate whenever you're comfortable to stop. I will continue from there, and then I'll throw it back to you.
Mm-hmm. The names are Trayvon Martin, Yvette Smith, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Laquan McDonald, Tanisha Anderson, Akay Gurley, Tamir Rice, Jermaine Reed, Natasha McKenna, Eric Harris, Walter Scott, Freddie Gray, William Champion, Sandra Bland.
Darius Scott, Samuel DeBose, Janet Wilson, Kaylin Rockmore, Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Joseph Mann, Terrence Crutcher.
Chad Robertson, Jordan Edwards, Aaron Bailey, Stefan Clark, Danny Ray Thomas, Antoine Rose, Botham Jean, Atiana Jefferson, Michael Dean, Ahmad Aubrey, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd.
Thank you. To that list, we have to add names like Rashard Brooks, who was killed just a couple of weeks ago in Atlanta, and so many other people. We also had on our show on Monday a guest who was telling us the story of how his brother was killed in police custody. His story was also so unusual, and the story that most people hadn't heard before. And this was the story. He had written an op-ed in the New York Times. Ryan Boodoo had written a story about his brother Ravi, and this is them as little kids. And that's what I want everyone to know, that every one of those names has a story just like Ravi's, and we need to know all of them. We are hearing a lot about George's story, but there's so many other people and so many names. And I'm just so incredibly touched that you would join us. You'd spend this time, and you would be so generous in reading those names with us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And with that, we will let you go. We have some housekeeping and other things to do with our audience. We want to give you back your evening. It's already 10:15 at night. We are so grateful. We know you have lots of Zoom calls tomorrow as well. It continues. I wish you the very best, also your staff and your team. And anything that we can do for you, please let us know. And I hope we can take you up on send either you or a colleague coming back to the State of Black New York. I am ashamed to say I don't know enough about that report. You've been doing it for a while, and we're going to make amends starting this year. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. Thank you so much. This was such a wonderful conversation. And
oops. Are you okay?
How's that for a way to end the show?
Better at the end than at the beginning, right? Okay, we can't talking about the art behind you, because my next interview with you is on the radio. You'll be just hanging out on your couch. So I want to hear about that art. Can you maybe just hold up the laptop, since anyway you're knocking it around? If you wouldn't mind, tell us about the art behind you.
This is a lovely piece that I was able to obtain from a good friend of mine. Actually, most of the artwork in this space was contributed by him. One other piece was actually commissioned by the Urban League of Philadelphia when they celebrated their 85th anniversary. And so the New York Urban League will be celebrating our 100th this year, and we look forward to having a piece commissioned by a wonderful gentleman, Brian Collier. So maybe the next time you show my living room space, you'll see a new piece that commissioned by the New York Urban League. I
love that. And Shok says, really moving. Mark says, always moving to hear those names. And thank you for your generosity, says Apollo. And we also got a laugh in there at the end with the laptop flying. So that was good. That shows us how tired we all are. And with that, we're going to go. Thank you very much. Arva Rice, everybody, follow her on Twitter. Bye, Arva. And thank you all for watching. She was fantastic, everyone. Please support the New York Urban League if you can. We know it's difficult times for most of us, but if you can, we would really appreciate it. And thank you for your time. And a big shout out again to our sponsors. We have so many folks who are helping this show stay on the air, including our wonderful producers, Rose Horowitz and Vandana Menon. Please support them by following their work, seeing what they're up to online. Follow them. It's so easy. Great, easy way to support folks. We want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Art & Co. Get involved with the world's largest online art auction, fundraising for COVID-19 victims, artandco.net, artandco.net. We also want to thank the Rutgers Global Entrepreneurship Experience Virtual Teen Camp, 20% off with the code SREE, Global Entrepreneurship Experience.org, Global Entrepreneurship Experience.org. And a big shout out to our new show, She's on Call, which launches launched a couple of weeks ago, and it's now on every single Sunday, 11 a.m. to noon Eastern. Please follow at She's on Call on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube. And a big shout out to Sujana Chandrasekhar and Marina Korean, 2 surgeons and friends of mine. I'm honored to be with them. We mentioned the New York Times read along. This week, our guest was Tom Jolly, print editor of the New York Times. He read the paper with us last Sunday. You can find all of this on our archives, youtube.com/Sreenet, youtube.com/Sreenet. And finally, please take my Muckrack course. It's free, Fundamentals of Social Media. It's a certificate. You earn it in about 2 hours of work, mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. Here's Lauren Mack's certificate, complete with my very authentic signature, as you can see there. Please go and sign up at mrac.co/social. Still comments are coming in. And Raghav says, thank you. And Sunny says, these segments are absolutely amazing. Glad I was able to join in. You are amazing, Rose. Sunny and Rose. Rose is our producer. We are very grateful to you and for your support, and you're educating so many of. Anytime you want to speak, we have a platform that we want to share with you and anybody else who would like to come on and talk. Yes, they are doing amazing work. And Sunny says several of her friends have already taken the course, and Rose is tagging Arva, Rice, Sunny, _Slaughter, and Rooks. These are all great women to follow. And Jonathan took the course about 1 hour and 45 minutes. All right, there's Jonathan showing off his skills. We love it. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon. We have 2 episodes coming up about immigration in the next 2 days. Make sure you tune in, 9 p.m. Eastern, both times, on Thursday and Friday. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you soon and look forward to staying in touch. Please email me, everybody. Thanks.